I'm Mike May. I'm blind. I work for the American Printing House for the Blind primarily, but I've been in accessible navigation most of my career, indoor navigation and outdoor navigation, so in airports and GPS and making those things accessible. So that's primarily what I do, and on my left is
Kathy Martinez. Hi, everybody. It's getting, I know that we're between you and your drinks, so it's kind of a rough time. But anyway, really happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Mike, and really honored to be here with my esteemed panelists. I am blind, and I am currently a consultant. I was full-time with Expedia up until about 2 months ago, and now I am consulting for Expedia. My passion in life has been travel and employment for people with disabilities. Christy?
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everyone. Christy Vanek. I am low vision, and I am the Global Director of Disability, Inclusion, and Accessibility at Otis Elevator Company. I also am very passionate about travel and am both a world and domestic traveler. And I'm not going to do a visual description, but I will say I was so excited about my Waymo ride, my first ever one earlier today, that I opened the door right into my forehead. So I have a little Band-Aid on my forehead, but it's all good.
We would have never known.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. I got it working. Hello, everybody. My name is Jill Mugge, and I am on the digital accessibility team at Hilton. And I am really excited to be here because accessible travel is one of our key areas of passions, I should say, and mission for Hilton. So I'm excited. Thanks.
all right, thank you. The title of the panel, it pretty much says it all, how the industry can make travel more inviting to the blind. And we have a lot of different suggestions, different perspectives on how we view that. And I'll have some sort of tips and tricks as we go along the way. Certainly, it really ranges from the whole gambit of accessible websites and apps and any materials that you have available to the navigation and interaction that there would be on site with your different venues. So we can tell you a lot about that, including a little bit about technology that's available. I will mention a few things that I'll say at the beginning and at the end, that if you forget everything else in between, don't forget this. When possible, consistency. So whatever you have in your job, in your venue, be as consistent as possible. So that's in the code world, the Braille labels are supposed to be between 48 and 54 inches above the floor to the left of the door, the handle that you're supposed to be using. And the reason that it's important is because the Braille is no good if you can't find it. So if you have to feel all over the walls to figure out where the Braille is, you'll never bother finding it. So if you know, here's the doorknob, what's the name of this office? You just go right to the left of it, up a little bit, there it is. And that's in building codes. But most of the rest of what we need as blind people is not in code. It comes through education. So that's where we'll be able to share some tips and tricks with you today about what can you do that can be consistent. The other thing I would tell you, that if you forget anything else or everything else, is when in doubt, just say, how can I help you? Now this seems like common sense customer service, but it's amazing how people get befuddled when they meet a blind person and they forget everything. And they start grabbing you and pushing you and pointing and saying, it's over there, it's go that way. And those kinds of things don't work. So boil it down, keep it simple, and just say, how can I help you? And then the person can decide. They might be totally blind, they might be low vision, they might be nervous. And so you can't guess how to help every single person or figure out their situation. But if you say, how can I help you? Now the ball's in their court, they can help. What do you think, Kathy?
Uh-oh, I said I would, okay. Is it on? Okay, how's that? All right.
Yeah.
So one thing I will say is Braille to the left of the door is very important. I was at the airport about a year ago, and I was desperately trying to find the women's restroom, and the door was to the right of the women's restroom. So where do you think I went? Yeah, right.
Men's room?
You got it. Fortunately, I couldn't see anything. But they were pretty shocked when they're like, I don't think you belong here. I think it's next door. So yes, to the left, very good. A couple of tips that I think are very important is say something. We don't know you're always there. If you watch us, struggle and fumble, I would, I know it's fascinating, but for us, it's not. I would also say that if you're guiding somebody and you're coming to a step, this has happened to me many times, they say step, and you have to say which way, up or down, and by that time it might be too late. I also think that any kind of training you can do for your staff, especially DMOs, I warn you, and this is a bit of a touchy subject, but I think it's important to say that when you say something is accessible, and when we were Expedia, when I was at Expedia, we had this talk, and we're still having this conversation. Most people say this is an accessible building, but they're typically referring to physical access. So I think it's really good to say, this aquarium or this site is wheelchair accessible, and if there are other amenities, quote unquote, or accessibility features, it's good to say, like on that video, somebody mentioned fonts, right, for museums, very important. Also, I think it's really important to talk about, if there's any video remote interpreting services. So when we say accessible, we have to remember that accessibility means different things to different people. Go ahead, Christy.
Kathy took some of the words right out of my mouth about accessibility, because I was going to say, if you say something is accessible, the question I would ask is accessible for whom? And I think that one thing you can do, I know there's a lot of DMOs in the room, is, like Kathy was saying, be more specific about what accessibility features, if you will, are present in the space, because this way we can get more accurate information before we come to your location. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is I think it's amazing that so many of you are gathering here today. And if you don't have it yet, I hope that you will start to form that coalition of talking to each other about what are the accessibility standards and framework for our industry. A great model that you could look to is there's a somewhat new but a growing Inclusive Retail Spaces Coalition, which is co-founded by Starbucks and Walmart, and CVS has joined as a founding member, and Otis Elevator has also joined as a infrastructure partner founding member. And the purpose of this group is to put together those frameworks that go above and beyond ADA and talk about what does good look like, what does great look like for how we create inclusive spaces in retail. And I would love to see the same coming out of DMOs to set that standard and set that framework for what does it mean to have an accessible and usable tourist location. Off to you, Jill.
I'm hot now. So I can speak to hotels, where's what I come from. And one of the things that first and foremost is when people are coming to vacation or on business, is they're going to be looking at the shop and dream flow on on our website, and the booking process as well. And all of that needs to be accessible to screen readers for people that use technology to access the information on there. And also, when they're booking rooms, there are accessible rooms. That is mandated by the ADA, and that does not include, there are no accessible rooms for people that are blind. The rooms that we have are for mobility and also for seeing, or seeing and mobility, so it's a combined. So it's an important distinction to make sure that when folks are coming, that they understand that putting people who are blind or low vision, that they're not all accessible rooms are for all disabilities. So that's a really important one. The other thing I want to bring up too is once folks get onto property, it can be very intimidating and very disorienting as people sort of enter into a hotel. Where's the front desk? Where are the elevators? My favorite is when people are like, oh, elevators are over there. So where's over there exactly? So we have partnered with Be My Eyes. So my partner in crime's over here. Hilton has partnered with Be My Eyes, and so guests can come on property and onto the Be My Eyes app. It's a free service that anybody can access, and they can find Hilton under the service directory under hotels, and by somebody needing support, they can push one button and actually talk to Hilton team members, and they will be able to help guide them to the elevators or to the front desk, or once they get into the rooms, to adjust the thermostats or navigate the coffee. You know, God forbid they have decaf coffee instead of high test. That's unacceptable for some. So it is. So yeah, that is one of the things that Hilton's doing to talk about accessible travel and really make the experience independent, make folks be able to feel confident as they're coming to the property. And yeah, that's very excited about that.
Yeah, you're talking about the accessible, quote unquote, accessible room, and it's that is frustrating because it's up to me to remember when I check in. By the way, I don't want an accessible room because I don't want the big shower, the walk-in shower, and somebody else might need it. I can't use that. But what does make it accessible is visual help. And that's why Be My Eyes is critical. There's another service, it's a paid service called Aira, and AIRA. Not everybody can afford that, but it is an option, and it's a way that you can have somebody on the other end that helps you figure out the things, the touch panel, thermostat, or shades, or the TV. All of these things are not accessible, but if you have visual assistance, then they do. And from a practical standpoint, it's a lot cheaper to have somebody call on a camera phone to Be My Eyes than it would be obviously for Hilton or Marriott or anybody else to get new thermostats and new TVs that talked and all of those things. I mean, in an ideal world, that's my house is set up so all of those things talk. My thermostats, my TV, I have, 29 Alexas. I'm not kidding. There's a lot. The microwave, everything talks. That's not practical in the real world in your DMOs or in a hotel. So the next best thing is to get remote sighted assistance, and that's a huge tool in our toolbox.
Mike, can I jump in here? So for the DMOs in the room, something that you can do is help by being an advocate. Make sure that your tourist locations in your community are aware of Be My Eyes and of Aira, and help get those services more prevalent with your tourist attractions, so that if I go to the the Atlanta Aquarium or the Shed Aquarium in Chicago, that you have Aira set up so that Aira is free in that premise because the attraction has provided it as an amenity. You can also be an advocate when it comes to, for example, like Uber and Lyft pickup zones at tourist locations. I can tell you one of the most frustrating and difficult things is if I cannot be picked up or dropped off at the place that I am trying to go. And very ironically, 3 of us up here just came from the San Francisco Lighthouse for a blind travel summit, and it is not possible to get picked up in front of that venue because of things with permitting. So to the extent that you as DMOs have influence or can influence over things like that, it makes a huge difference, I would say, not just for blind, low vision visitors, but also for those who may have mobility challenges or restrictions.
And we should say about Be My Eyes that they have 2 kinds of service. One is volunteers. They have, 5 million volunteers. Any one of you could sign up, and when you had a few minutes, you could be on as a sighted volunteer. So if a blind person needs somebody, you get an alert on your phone, you answer, you see what they're seeing through their camera, and you say, oh, that's, whatever it is. You help them out visually, Be My Eyes. In the case of Hilton or Procter & Gamble or any of the other companies that subscribe to Aira, they pay for it, but more importantly, they funnel those calls to their trained people. And that's a big difference. If I get some volunteer that's in Germany and is meaningfully trying to help me out, and I'm in a Hilton and they're trying to walk me through how to deal with the television or the thermostat, they're not going to be obviously as effective as a trained agent that's
However,
in the loop.
If you happen to speak German, they will be very helpful. So
That's true.
That's one thing you have to remember, is that Be My Eyes have, the thing about their volunteer pools, they can't, there's the language issue. And as far as I know, and I want to be corrected because I think this is important, does Aira have multiple language services, or is it just primarily English?
They do. They have
Great.
French and Spanish.
Perfect.
But, yeah.
But I think it's important to know that that this information can get transmitted in a variety of languages.
And the significance to you guys is, as Christy was saying, be an advocate. If you don't have somebody that's available to show a blind person around your facility, that would be the ideal situation because you know it. But if you're stuck behind a desk and you can't leave, they can use Be My Eyes to explore your facility, or Aira if they happen to subscribe to it. So that's just a good resource to know about. Since I'm, I think, the only one up here with a service dog, I'll make a few comments about that. Mine, who's sleeping away here, unimpressed by the conversation. Most people, what they know about guide dogs is, oh no, you're not supposed to touch them without asking. And that's good. The world has been educated about guide dogs, but there are misperceptions. And certainly in hotels, occasionally you'll get the rule following person who says you have to be on a pet floor. And that's not the case. The hotels do not require that, but it kind of makes logical sense. They think, keep all the dogs together. If somebody's allergic, then it's better that the dog hair is all in one place. But from a legal standpoint, they can't do that. So sometimes I have to be patient and educate them that no, I don't really want to be on that floor. And the dogs can go certainly anywhere in the hotel, in the restaurant, any of the facilities. So it's not a big deal, but I think in this world where people are abusing the service dog label and getting certificates that say their animal's a service dog, that kind of makes it difficult for the rest of us that have legit dogs, both in rideshare, where there's a lot of pushback from drivers who've had crazy dogs running around in their cars, or on airplanes where they've had to deal with lots of dogs that are questionably service dogs.
For service animals, they are allowed to go anywhere in the hotel. We have, so there's the ADA that guides a lot of our decisions and how we set up our policies, but we also have brand standards for whether you're staying at a DoubleTree or a Curio or one of the properties. It is part of our brand standards that service animals, that you don't have to be on a pet floor. That's not the case. Sometimes not everyone is 100% trained. They might be a new individual, and so yes, sometimes there's some education that our folks have to take hold of. So there's actually two questions that you're allowed to ask. The first one is if your dog is for a disability, if he's helping you for a disability, and then like what you were saying, Mike, is what exactly do they do? So those are the only two questions. There's no such thing as a certified service animal. That's not the case. So it's a really important point for us that when we're putting out ads or any other material with service animals, that it's understood that is very different than our pet policy. It's an important point that we're spending a lot of time educating.
Occasionally there'll be hotels that have a document you're supposed to sign, and that's another thing where I probably hear that more often than the pet floor thing, is they want to get me to sign a document, and that's not required either. If you're showing a blind person around, as much as possible, let them feel their own way. So what's typical when I'm in a hotel is somebody says, well, let me show you where the elevator is. And then they, oh, I got the button. Okay, now I don't know where the button is, and you're not going to be with me the next 3 days. So I need to feel where the button is. So describe it, say the button is between the two doors right in front of you. That's great. And when you get in the elevator, and particularly if it's a keyed elevator, then they want to put the key, and I need to find out where that pad is if it's a keyed elevator. Same thing with pushing the buttons. They're usually in Braille these days, which is great, but depending on how many floors there are, I might have to do a bit of feeling around to find out where is my floor.
And then somebody else will have pressed the button to go somewhere else. So it's always good to know where the button is, where your floor button is, and where the lobby button is. I've ended up, I probably should turn this on. I've ended up in a few parking garages from not knowing exactly where the lobby button is.
And occasionally the Braille is a little bit different than what it says in print. Yeah. So it always says main floor. But in some hotels, the main floor could be number 4, could be number 2, 1, and so it can be confusing what that Braille says. But you don't have to figure that out.
Yeah. And if I may, while we're on the topic of elevators, for those of you who may be building owners or involved with a building. Something you can do is advocate to make your elevator more accessible to blind and low vision people. One of the best and actually not very expensive ways to do that is by adding audio enunciation. So a typical elevator will only ding when it arrives, 1 ding for up, 2 dings for down. And then when you're riding in the elevator, it will not announce any floor numbers. But with a simple addition of a speaker and a soundboard, you can have that elevator talking. So it says going up, and so that it says each floor that it arrives to. Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, we're almost at the halfway point here, so I'd like you to be thinking about questions you'd like to ask, and you're wondering about it in the context of your particular venue, because we don't really know who we're talking to out here. We assume there's some DMOs and probably some other organizations, but be specific, and you can ask this panel. I will mention one other tool to consider that's really helpful to me and to a lot of blind people are tactile maps. And so it's wonderful. It's not that expensive to get a tactile map of your lobby. Maybe not the whole hotel, but the lobby, the restaurants, and that's just something you could have at the reception desk. You could have multiple copies and give the person one, or you can have one that stays there. You can get more permanent ones that might be laminated. There's a lot of different ways to do tactile maps. It depends on your situation. But let's say in a visitor bureau, I might want to know the layout of things, and it's a lot easier for me to figure out feeling this tactile representation than somebody trying to describe it to me. So let me just ask it. If you have a question, just say your name and organization, perhaps, and then fire away.
Hey, Mike. It's Joe from Be My Eyes. And I just have a question, and really, especially for the DMOs in the group, and I don't think there's any representatives from these two companies, but a little bit about Uber and Lyft and what it's like to use those platforms as someone who is blind. And I don't know if, actually, I believe it was in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, there was a protest to that effect. But maybe just to share, because those are two services that wherever you're going, you're probably going to use, of course, in addition to Waymo, and what challenges people who are blind are specifically facing related to those ride-sharing companies.
I'll start. I think Christy made a really good point about locating your ride when you request a ride and you're not in a really super quiet street or you don't have sighted help. I've been charged, I don't know how many times, where I just can't find the ride. I can't find the car. And they can't leave, it's been in situations where they can't leave their car. I guess I've actually had some pretty bad experiences on rideshare. I won't say which company. But the other one is getting dropped off, same thing. Like, I got dropped off somewhere where I had no clue where I was. The person did not speak English well at all, or at all. That's not anybody's fault, but it's a dilemma that I think a lot of blind people face. If we can't communicate with the driver, fortunately, I am eligible. I am able to afford Aira, so I got out my phone and just said, can you kind of let me know where I'm at? So it worked out, but it was very nerve-wracking because it was super loud and I was nowhere near my destination.
I can add on. I think that from the conversations I've had in my own personal experience, we are starting to find that the apps for actually booking the ride are quite accessible. So then that first pain point does come in locating the driver to get into the car. I would say from everyone I've talked to in my community, airports are a particular challenge because of how busy they are in different pickup zones and just the volume of traffic. And then similar to Kathy, I've had some very uncomfortable and bad experiences with drivers where I have felt unsafe. And so I think that having that ability to share my ride, I really appreciate from both of the major players in the space. I would say that feeling safe as a blind, low vision, relatively young woman is something that is difficult.
Yeah, those demonstrations you heard about and that were in the news had a lot to do with guide dog rejection, and anywhere from 20 to 40% of guide dogs or users are having their guide dog rejected. I'm not going to take you because you have a dog. And that's what the protests were primarily about. But sometimes people won't take you because you're blind. So if you send them a text and say, I'm blind, they'll cancel. It happened with one of our group just yesterday. So where you can help in your venue is on the departure side. So when I'm at a hotel and I want to book a ride, I keep my dog hidden till the last minute. So I'll get behind the bell stand or stay in the lobby, and then I'll ask somebody, when you see a Chevy white or whatever, or Honda Accord, let me know. What I have to tell them is, don't talk to the driver yourself. Tell me when they're there, because sometimes they'll go up and they say, oh, by the way, I have a blind guy with a dog inside. Okay, and they hit the accelerator and they're out of there. But you can help by flagging that driver for the blind person and then let them do the talking.
I remember in DC, I would have to, oh my God, it was just so crazy. I would have to get out. I didn't have a dog, so the person with the dog would hide, and then I would get the Uber or Lyft, and then I would keep my hand on it and say, okay, it's here, and they would pop out, and the driver would try to leave, and be like, dude, I'm like touching your car here. So I think it's, it is a big problem. It's a big problem, not only for people with service animals, but for people who travel with people with service animals.
Mm-hmm. I don't know who else is in the room here, but I'll just mention a couple other topics in case it resonates with somebody. Accessible parks, that's been more in the news.
Accessible hiking trails. I love to
Yeah.
hike, and there's a really good community of us blind and low vision hikers.
Convention centers, museums, all of these things, we want to have access to. Airbnb, is there anybody from Airbnb here?
There's a great group in San Francisco Bay Area called the Blind Posse, who've done incredible work around the wide variety of museums that we've got here, and get narrated tours and sometimes touch tours, with the appropriate gloves and all. But still, they've really made an amazing inroads into the world of museums with a lot of very good feedback and welcome. The museums have welcomed the input.
Mike, it looks like we have a question.
Yeah. Hi there. My name's Helen Akesh, and I'm with the Oregon State Parks. I'm the ADA coordinator. I'm glad you mentioned hiking. I'm glad you mentioned parks. So can you give me some examples, some ideas that we can incorporate and infuse to really attract people with low vision, visually impaired? We have a lot of blind athletes that come hike a lot of the trails throughout the Oregon State Parks. We have 273 parks statewide, and we really want to encourage more opportunities, and we're really trying to improve our accessibility on all fronts. So anything that you can offer or provide insight in would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Where are you located?
Oregon,
Well, what city?
all. Oh, it's 273 states.
Yeah, I know you're talking for the whole state, but where are you from? What city?
Oh, I'm east of Salem.
Okay. Yeah.
Silver Falls State Park, right there.
I think it's important to know, at least for blind people, you don't have to make smooth paths and pave things, and that might be helpful for some wheelchairs, but I can speak for myself. And this has been my world, which is maps. I want to be able to have some control to go independently, and it's not that hard to map things with different kinds of GPS apps. And there's lots of them that talk, and you can even drop breadcrumbs along the way. There's a lot of different products that can help. And so if I were working with a parks in a particular area, I would focus on that first.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on that. Even like a physical, tactile map of trails would be helpful. And I also second what Mike says. I don't want you to make the trail easier in terms of, I still want it to be nature the way it is meant to be. But for me as low vision, like, have your trail markings much clearer, have them maybe more frequent, have someone actually monitor to see, oh, is that paint on the tree wearing off? And definitely I also second what Mike said about the accessibility in terms of GPS and breadcrumbs. There's lots of great solutions out there. Just one that comes to mind is like NaviLens. What if you had that as part of your trail markers so that... Oh yeah, sure. So NaviLens is like a QR code on steroids that can be picked up and located from much further away. And also it has some smart features built in that it can tell me like what the QR code is. It can help me get directions of how to get there step by step. It's really wonderful. You can find it, I think, in many big box stores now because Procter & Gamble uses NaviLens on many of their products.
Yeah, it's not in the stores per se, but it's on the products. Like Kellogg's has a lot of the NaviLens codes. It gives you a lot more detail. You do have to put that in the environment. So if you have signs anyway, it's easy enough to just incorporate a NaviLens code onto that sign. The beauty of breadcrumbs is they're virtual, and it just means somebody needs to go walk that route one time with the GPS breadcrumb app on and recording that route, and then it's just something you have to be able to share.
Yeah, if you Google accessible QR codes, there's a couple out there. NaviLens is one, but yeah, it's a great way to almost waypoint your way through. We've seen it office buildings, things like that. So I think there's another question over here.
My name's Dodie Piper. I'm with the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, and we're currently looking at different ways to help with wayfinding for people who are blind and low vision. Can you speak to your experience using beacon-based wayfinding tools?
That's my world, yes, beacons. Bluetooth beacons are old hat, yeah. I mean, they require either batteries and the maintenance involved with replacing batteries, or a lot more expensive if you wire them in. So they can work and they're better than nothing. But these days you can do mapping with LiDAR or with the NaviLens that I think would be less expensive and more effective than using beacons. And I started out in my companies, we did beacons, but that was 12 years ago. So we've evolved into other things now, and I can certainly share my card and tell you the companies that provide some of this different navigation technology. The other thing with museums is in terms of announcing what the exhibits are. And this is, one way, there's a number of museums in Louisville, Kentucky I've been in, where you can do a search on the exhibit. You can either just randomly walk around and hear what's there. They'll be announced to you by proximity, or you can search the list and say, oh, this is a particular exhibit I want to go to. When you get to that exhibit, then there's a detail button that will play either an audio MP3 file or a text file to give you the content. And that can be web-based, so as your museum changes what it's hosting, you can change the content on the website. Unfortunately I see more often than not is maybe 1 out of 10 things has content. And so if I'm going to go into a museum and I want to be independent, I'd really like to have everything.
And then a couple additions for more low-tech solutions for wayfinding could be things like tactile flooring, and then from a low-vision perspective, making sure that your signage is high contrast and larger font.
Yeah, I did a project recently with, I never would have thought there's a weather museum. But, you know, in Boulder, Colorado, and some of those places where we have, universities that focus on these things, and I was amazed, this weather museum, it was only 3 floors, but they were bound to determine every aspect of that museum was going to be accessible, and they're making great efforts to having that happen.